The recent development in global defense news has captured significant attention, as reports have surfaced about the United States acquiring old Soviet-era fighter jets from Kazakhstan. This unexpected move has raised eyebrows among military analysts, political commentators, and aviation enthusiasts worldwide. The story begins with Kazakhstan deciding to part ways with its fleet of MiG-31 interceptors and potentially other aircraft types that date back to the Cold War era. These jets, while not the most modern in today's terms, still hold considerable value in certain contexts, especially in training, reverse engineering, or supplying allies who are already familiar with operating such platforms. The United States' decision to obtain these jets is intriguing, primarily because it signals a possible indirect support strategy towards Ukraine in its ongoing conflict with Russia. By acquiring Soviet-designed jets, the US could be aiming to provide Ukraine with aircraft it can quickly integrate into its forces, since Ukrainian pilots and maintenance crews are already experienced with Soviet aviation technology. This approach bypasses the long training periods needed for Western aircraft and allows for faster deployment in active combat zones. Kazakhstan's role in this transaction is equally fascinating. As a former Soviet republic with close economic ties to both Russia and China, its decision to sell military hardware to a Western nation could carry geopolitical consequences. While Kazakhstan has maintained a careful balancing act in its foreign policy, avoiding overt alignment with either side in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, this sale could subtly indicate a shift or at least a willingness to engage in opportunistic trade. It's also worth noting that many post-Soviet states have aging military inventories that are costly to maintain, so selling off such assets to interested buyers is a financially attractive option. Meanwhile, for the United States, acquiring these jets domestically allows for discretion and control over where they ultimately end up, reducing the diplomatic risk of directly transferring them from an American airbase to a war zone. There's also the possibility that these jets will never see combat and instead serve as valuable sources of spare parts. The MiG-31, for instance, has specialized avionics, engines, and airframe components that can be repurposed for existing fleets in allied nations. In addition, reverse engineering older Soviet aircraft allows American defense contractors and engineers to study their design intricacies, weaknesses, and potential countermeasures. Such intelligence can be invaluable in both developing advanced combat tactics and improving the survivability of Western aircraft in potential engagements with Russian-built jets. The public reaction to this deal has been mixed. Supporters argue that it's a clever, indirect way for the US to aid Ukraine without escalating direct military involvement. They point out that supplying Ukraine with familiar aircraft could help close the gap in air power that has been a critical factor in the conflict. On the other hand, critics warn that such moves risk provoking further tensions with Russia, especially if it becomes clear that these jets are being funneled to the front lines. They also question the financial cost and whether investing in older aircraft is the most efficient way to support allies. From a broader perspective, this story fits into a larger pattern of unconventional arms transfers during wartime. Just as the US and its allies have sourced Soviet-caliber ammunition from countries like Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, and South Korea to supply Ukraine, acquiring older jets represents another creative method of strengthening Kyiv's military capabilities without deploying NATO pilots or direct combat forces. Another parallel in this narrative is Qatar's recent gesture of gifting Boeing 747 aircraft to the United States. While this is a completely different type of transaction, it reflects the ongoing trend of strategic equipment transfers between nations based on political relationships, economic interests, and mutual defense considerations. In the case of Qatar, the move strengthens its diplomatic ties with Washington and may provide the US with additional logistical capabilities for cargo transport or VIP missions. For Kazakhstan, selling jets to the US could open the door for improved trade relations or defense cooperation in the future, although it could also draw scrutiny from Moscow. The aviation details of the MiG-31 add another layer of interest to the story. Known for its incredible speed, capable of reaching Mach 2.83, and its ability to operate in extreme conditions, the MiG-31 is not an ordinary fighter jet. It is primarily an interceptor, designed to destroy high-altitude, high-speed targets such as bombers or reconnaissance aircraft. While its avionics may be dated compared to fifth-generation fighters like the F-35, it remains a formidable platform when equipped with modernized radar and missile systems. For Ukraine, which still operates a variety of Soviet-era aircraft like the Su-27 and MiG-29, adding MiG-31s to its arsenal could significantly enhance its long-range interception capabilities. Geopolitically, the optics of the United States purchasing Soviet aircraft from Kazakhstan are complex. Russia, already highly sensitive to any perceived Western involvement in Ukraine, is likely to interpret this as another sign of encirclement and military pressure. Kazakhstan will have to navigate this carefully, as its economic and security ties with Russia remain strong. However, Kazakhstan has also been diversifying its foreign policy, building stronger connections with China, Turkey, and Western nations. This sale could be part of a broader strategy to establish itself as a more independent actor in the international arena, capable of engaging in defense deals with multiple partners without fully committing to any single bloc. From a journalistic and storytelling standpoint, the narrative potential of this development is immense. It combines elements of Cold War nostalgia, modern geopolitical strategy, military technology analysis, and the human drama of ongoing conflict. The fact that these jets are relics of a bygone era yet still relevant in today's warfare makes the story even more compelling. For content creators, particularly on platforms like YouTube, this topic offers multiple angles to explore. Historical retrospectives on the MiG-31, breakdowns of how such deals are brokered, speculative discussions on whether these jets will be deployed to Ukraine, and political analysis of Kazakhstan's role. This story also fits into a recurring pattern where older military hardware is reintroduced into service in modern conflicts. In Syria, for example, decades-old tanks and aircraft were brought back into action due to necessity. In Ukraine, we've seen everything from refurbished T-72 tanks to Cold War-era missile systems being used on the battlefield. The idea that a 1970s designed interceptor like the MiG-31 could still have a role in a 21st century conflict challenges conventional thinking about military modernization. It underscores the reality that, in certain contexts, tried and tested equipment can still be a valuable asset, particularly when integrated into a larger, modernized defense network. Furthermore, the acquisition highlights the often overlooked global arms market for used military equipment. Many nations maintain surplus inventories of aircraft, vehicles, and weapons systems that, while outdated by their standards, can be extremely useful to other countries. The transfer of such assets is not only about economics but also about diplomacy, signaling alliances, and creating dependencies that can influence future geopolitical decisions. In this case, the US engaging with Kazakhstan over such a deal may foster stronger bilateral relations and give Washington more influence in Central Asia, a region where both Russia and China are actively competing for dominance. Public curiosity about how these jets will be transported, refurbished, and potentially deployed adds to the intrigue. Will they be dismantled and shipped in parts to avoid attention? Will they undergo modernization in US or European facilities before reaching their final destination? Such questions invite speculation, analysis, and debate, exactly the type of engagement that drives news cycles and social media discussions. For aviation fans, there's the added excitement of seeing rare aircraft types potentially restored to operational status, even if only for limited roles. The connection to the broader Ukraine conflict makes this story highly relevant in today's media landscape. Military aid to Ukraine has been one of the most covered topics in global news since early 2022, and any unconventional form of assistance, such as supplying Soviet-era jets, immediately sparks interest. The potential for these aircraft to change the tactical balance, even slightly, makes their fate worth following. Meanwhile, the symbolic value of turning a Cold War relic into a tool for resisting modern Russian aggression cannot be ignored. Overall, this development is more than just a quirky news item about the US buying old jets. It's a window into the complex world of international defense cooperation, the adaptability of military strategy, and the ongoing ripple effects of the Russia-Ukraine war. Whether these jets end up in Ukrainian skies, in American museums, or in the hands of engineers studying their systems, their journey from Kazakhstan to the United States will be a fascinating chapter in the evolving story of global security. It's a reminder that in geopolitics, even decades-old technology can find new relevance, and that strategic thinking often involves looking backward as much as forward.